The sound has been shattered. Well, it was about 5 minutes ago by two acrobatic training aircraft. Oh, Neil, they must do this on purpose. Do you know what? I think I agree with you. I do. I headed out this afternoon. I thought, I'm making, for full disclosure, the Photowalk actually not of a morning as I often do, but the previous afternoon to when you hear this. So if you hear it on a Friday, I'm recording this Thursday afternoon. It is 1:54 and 32 seconds PM, obviously. They seem to have gone. Peace, tranquility. Put my letters down. I'm just outside my hometown. I'm not quite sure where I am. I might have to do a what 3 words on this when I get back to base later on. But let me get an opening picture, a scene setter. I've got the Ricoh GR3 for possibly just one more week. And then it goes back to mpb.com, who loaned it to me. And I'm taking out instead, I'll tell you when I get it. Here we go. I'm pointing into the air to see how it deals with, because there is extreme sunlight. I'm just dropping the exposure a tad, underexpose it, photographing through some wonderful branches right into the sunshine. Look up, as our good friend Steve Shipman used to say. Let's have a look at that. Oh, okay, I think. Might need to, using a little bit more underexposure, so I tend to photograph an aperture priority. I've underexposed by 2 stops now. Right. I'm still slightly disconcerted and discombobulated by not being able to look through an eyepiece. Get over it, Neil. You've had it now 3 weeks. I know, but I do love the pictures coming out of it.
The Photowalk is brought to you by mpb.com. Quality used photo and video kit. Buy, sell, trade, create at mpb.com.
You may well be thinking, hang about, Neil, today's title of the show. It's all a bit Spielberg from 1977, isn't it? That time you spent amongst the stones, that sort of asteroid belt that you were describing to us of stones last week, the Neolithic ones, where you couldn't quite work out how or why they were there. Maybe it's gone to your head. You're thinking aliens. You're going to start making Devil's Tower out of garden clay next. If you don't know science fiction, by the way, and the Close Encounters, one in particular, that intro will make you think I've been eating the mushrooms I photograph on the walks in the woodland that I make. But fear not, I've not headed down that congested avenue of conspiracy yet, though I did look up and go on a very brief web journey last night to see if I could find photographers that specialise in capturing photographs of large green creatures from the planet Vogan or something, flying saucers, not because I wanted to tease them, but because it's a genre, along with the paranormal actually, that I think would make a really interesting subject, certainly interesting photographers to listen to. It's different, you have to admit that. Let me just climb over the branch here. Right. Having said that, there actually doesn't seem to be anybody with their head far above the parapet enough claiming this as a speciality, so which I was quite surprised about. I thought surely I'll be able to find flying saucer and paranormal activity photographers, but no, not a sausage. I did though find a photographer called Leo Byrne, Berne, who made a book called For the Aliens, where he photographed everyday scenes that might explain Earth to the casual alien visitor, which I will link to. Though frankly, if an alien did read that, they probably wouldn't know what to make of this place. The party scenes in nightclubs for starters. Where are we? North, east, south, helicopter. That way, right. Anyway, enough of the sci-fi. Let me highlight the word encounters, though, because that is the word I used in the title today. In this case, though, it's encounters of the photographic kind, and equally actually the humanity kind. This story today that my guest will share is a very, very good, very strong demonstration of why I so love making this show. Number one, it's a sliding door story in many ways, which is my favourite kind of happenstance. That helicopter's getting closer. Are they looking for us? They're looking for a photo walker. He doesn't quite know where he is. So yes, number one, it's a sliding door story in many ways, which it is my favourite kind of happenstance. Steve Reeves is my guest. He's a sublime storyteller. And it all starts quite by accident, really, which, well, when he leaves school without a clue about what he wants to actually do, he goes into a job centre. Now, job centres had a reputation of not necessarily being the most helpful with information always when it came to, well, if you went in there with some kind of creative aspiration. And I think a job centre is very much a British thing, but you can guess what that is by the name alone. So when he left school, he went to the job centre, and he can tell the rest of that story. So that's part one. And then, let's up the ante a bit. Then, and this is sliding doors moment two, his wife buys him a gift in 2018 that changes the way he saw photography, and more importantly, introduced him to, wait for it, the power of the still image to tell somebody's life story. And I know we talk about that quite a lot, the still image having that power to tell somebody's life story. But our Steve takes it one step further still, and he starts to write about the people that he photographs as well. So today it's about listening. It's about taking time to spend time with people. So it seems to me, and it's a definite theme of the program today, that ears really do help you see better.
Today on the Photowalk.
Yeah, we don't talk to old people anymore. No one does. People are, and particularly in our society, particularly in places like London, they are literally walked over, and ignored the whole time. And I've found that they've got incredible stories to tell.
Absolutely.
And I love it when old people talk about, when they were 20 or 25 having sex and all this crazy stuff they got. And it just makes you realise that actually life is it's a circle.
Stories of life told by photographers. And today we're joined as you and I walk by Steve Reeves in a show that's written by you from the letters, the thoughts and the pictures that you've shared with me. And I promise you'll love today's stories. Everyone is a photographer on this walk, whatever camera you use, and that includes the, not so humble smartphone, because this is a show about how taking and making photos has you feel and what it does for us and others around us. We'll be inspired as we walk too by words from other picture makers and adventurers with a camera, past and present. In the mailbag today, abandoned houses, a barn cat, rodeo, and a tree fit for a mallee. All stories that come from the camera and pen of our first letter writer. And there is definitely a theme about writing percolating through today's show. Also, a tip-off for a Netflix program, or show, sorry, I know you're going to want to watch. A podcast featuring a hero of mine photographically. And more about the why of making 365s. It's never too late to start. Neil, you've been talking about this a bit of late. I know, but it's been doing wonders for me. And just the best story about why sometimes bare-faced cheek can win you the best portraits. Nearly 7 billion people on this planet are able to make a photograph with something and record life. So we're not walking alone, documenting our place and time in this world. Checklist out, coffee, Garibaldi's, walking boots and, I think a notebook and pen, because there's more out there than just the picture alone this week. Are you ready? Let's start the walk. The woodland that I'm in today, this is wonderful. And you know what I really like? I like the pools of light coming through the canopy. I mean, it's still essentially winter, of course, so we don't get the shafts of light. The pools aren't focused like a sort of gobo from the air. Is that the right word? Gobo from the air? But, let me try and get a pool of light here quickly before that sun goes, because there's some cloud approaching us. On goes the Ricoh GR3. Sun's going quickly. I'm going to need to be quick. ISO 100, f4, hand holding. There we go, 1/100th. I'm not quite sure. Sun's on its way out. But it's a sketchbooker. There's no doubt about that. I said to Sam last night when I was just checking through the letters I was going to read out today, my Sam that is, not the Sam that's about to arrive at Platform Mailbag, that I feel genuinely blessed, and I mean this. It's not just saying this as an overused cliche awards dinner platitude. I feel genuinely both blessed and flattered to receive your words from the short, "Hey Neil, have you seen this? Have you heard of this? Oh, you should speak to this person." You know, those mails are fantastic. Right through to what you'll hear today, the longer, very considered mails and stories. And one in particular, a fabulous story about something that happened, which, I don't want to do a spoiler. I was about to go into one, but you know what I mean. All the size, all the letters, all the sizes of all the... Help me out here. All the lengths, thank you, all the lengths of letters that I receive, whether they're short or long, I'm genuinely flattered to receive them. So please keep sending them in. Tell me about your photographic stories. Send them to stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show. There is a contact page on our website, and that also has some additional, I suppose, conversation starter questions on there, which might help you start your letter. So a very appropriate letter to start the show with. As you'll appreciate as the letter moves along, I'm just stooping underneath some low holly there. Ouch. Just got me, back of the head. Yes, a very appropriate letter to start with from Samantha Ramsey. Hello, Sam, in Canada land. She says, "I've honestly started and stopped this letter to you countless times, Neil. I really have. No excuses, other than nerves and perhaps a touch of imposter syndrome." Ah, Samantha, join the imposter syndrome club. There's a lot of us in here. It takes ages to get to the bar, I tell you. My name is Sam, and I discovered your podcast last year when my favourite radio host retired. I've been listening to her as long as I can remember, and the radio just wasn't the same. I mean, the station, the people were great, but I found I was no longer excited listening to the radio. I've never listened to podcasts before, but I couldn't stomach the drives to work in silence. And your podcast was the first to pop up when I ran a search on Google Podcasts. Samantha, we meet. Here we go, another sliding doors moment. We meet by happy accident, it would seem, because there are so many super podcasts around. I looked this up. Here's a quiz. You never know, you might need this in a pub quiz one day. The question could come up. How many podcast titles do you think there are in the world? Now, I know many sort of fall by the wayside. 7 is the episode number, is the accepted, it was anyway, for years. I would assume it's still the same or thereabouts. 7 is usually the episode number where most podcasters give up. Maybe the streets aren't paved with gold, and it's very hard work that they didn't quite consider, especially if they're going to try and have some sort of consistency to their work. But how many podcast titles do you think there are in the world? Now, Sam, your host, your radio host, probably would have had a fancy jingle at this point, a kind of a timer. Set you a timer. There's my question. How many podcast titles do you think there are in the world? Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. Beep. Time out. What do you think? 3.02. That's an important bit. Let's just round it down to 3. 3 million podcast titles. And Sam, here we are, you and I, together in the podcast sphere. Anyways, I've had a camera, says Sam, in my hands for as long as I can remember. My mother always had a camera nearby, and I've all of her old film and early digital cameras. To me, photography is an extension of itself. It is who I am, and I'm defined by it. I can't see myself without a camera. In fact, I feel like I'll be adrift in life without one. I love to photograph anything. It honestly doesn't matter what the subject is. It's all about the story you can create in the frame. And the idea that a photograph speaks more to what is excluded to what is included within the frame. My word, Sam, you need to come to co-present. No, you can take over. Yes, I agree wholeheartedly with you. One of my favourite things to do is write alongside my photos. See, I said this letter could almost, well, I tell you, it could almost have been written for this show. That's for sure, for this particular episode. One of my favourite things to do is write alongside my photos to create a space for them full of words. And I've included a few links to my blog and a couple of favourite pieces that I've written over the years. The first one is from the perspective of an abandoned home near me. Very clever writing. The second one is about my barn cat. The third is about rodeos. And lastly, my mallee tree. Apologies if the spelling is incorrect. It's not. You got it spot on. M-A-L-I, mallee. And I do hope you enjoy them. And lastly, if you're looking for photographers to speak to or new work to lose yourself in, I highly recommend Dave Brosher. He's recently written a new book, The Art of Misadventure, a collection of misadventures in his photographic life thus far. I love the sound of that. I really do, Sam. Misadventures in photographic life. Doesn't that just explain what we do, eh? Isn't that the perfect description? I'm going to enjoy looking at his work. I've not had a chance just yet, but I will. As this episode goes out, I'm going to sit down, a cup of coffee in hand, at least 2, possibly 3 Garibaldis, and look through Dave's work, and I'll be dropping him a line, I have no doubt. Anyways, thank you for creating a space for photographic musings. Please keep on blathering. I will. I shall blather away. Sam, thank you so much for your kind words. The projects, well, where do we start? I don't know where to start. The rodeo one, fabulous. It's a black and white project, this particular one, and the movement within it, I feel like I'm right in the way of the horses sometimes. I really do. Fabulous work, full of energy, very energetic piece. Love that one. And the opening prose on the abandoned house story, I noted it down here so that I could read it. I'm not going to read the whole thing because I'd like people to go and explore and find it. And I will put the links, of course, on the show notes on the website today. But let me read the opening prose from your abandoned house story, a story which is called Time. There is a place, a still space, a space which is held together by memory alone. Its soul moves through shattered glass and torn curtains to gently stir long dead letters, abandoned. I've often wondered, while sitting amidst pieces of a window on a deck that groans in pain, what this bruised house must feel, think, and wonder. And the next words I'll let you find. Fantastic. Sam, brilliant. So yes, I've left links to your stories. There are some show page pictures from those stories as well. And I've a link to Sam's Insta. And within that grid, you will find a picture that just flies out of the screen at you. It was so clever. I loved it. And it was a picture full of intrigue. You know, if pictures are full of intrigue, they make you want to know more. Then, that's the battle done, isn't it, really? It's a seat. It's a lonely seat in a forest. And on the seat, there's a pile of books. Follow my link, or better still, go to Sam's Insta. You'll find it. It's not far down, but go and have a look. Can I also say, by the way, Sam, the design of your website, which is a Squarespace one, I really enjoyed it. Totally different on the story pages, the blog pieces that you've sent to, I think, to just about anything I've seen. All right, shall we take some audio? I think we should. Let's have some audio inspiration. I'm going to take you back to an episode. It was 306, to an episode with Gabrielle Matola. Here's something about street photography and rejection, which I suppose it's more appropriate to the conversation later on when Steve talks about making photographs of strangers. And, of course, by dint of the fact he then tells their story in words, having to speak to them and get far more than the frame alone. So it's appropriate to that. And perhaps, though, there's something that could be applicable in part when we mention the two words imposter and syndrome in that order. So from episode 306, Streetwise and Confident, here's Gabrielle Matola.
I haven't gotten over my fear of rejection. I face it almost every time I make a picture and every time I get a no. What it is I've learned how to handle that in a way that doesn't stop me the next time. To answer your question, yes and no. No, I haven't gotten over my fear of rejection. What I've done is I've changed my relationship to it. So if somebody rejects me, I get past it a lot quicker, and I get back on the horse. I move on to the next one. Sometimes as quickly as possible. And it stings. It does. It stings a little bit, but I don't have to hold on to that sting. And I also have learned that it's never about me. I don't have to internalize that rejection. It's about the other person. It's what they're going through. It's their, they probably, they may say no to everybody. It's not about you. And that's really helpful, I think. And not just in photography, but life.
Gabrielle Matola from episode 306. For links to those that you hear on the show today, and we've got some film inspiration today on the show page, then go to the website photowalk.show and find today's episode. It stopped singing. I was about to say to you, oh no, there we go. I'll hold the microphone up. Our bird experts in the room here. What's this bird? There we go. He's gone a bit higher. Might be a bit trickier to hear. What's that bird? I want to become better at stuff like this. I really do. I've been recording the podcasts for as long as I can remember, with a slight dalliance with different types of microphones now and then for a long, long time. But there's a microphone that's just come out from a company called Rode, which is a reporter microphone, which I've heard some test pieces with, which is really good. And then you can plug it into, using what's called the XLR connector on the bottom of the microphone, you can plug it into a small box, which is the recorder. And I mean a small box, a tiny box. And I've been thinking that would be perfect, because then that frees me up my iPhone to be able to use it for spotting trees with my tree app. And also I've got a bird song app on there, which would be handy as well to be able, because I can't look or listen to that at all when I'm talking to you using the iPhone as my microphone. So, yeah. Well, I'll leave that to you. If you know what that is, let me know, please. stories@photowalk.show. A tip-off, a letter, and an introduction to today's guest. That's what I've got for you over the next few minutes. This first one, short and sweet, from Mark Creamer. Neil, have you seen Netflix's Tales by Light? Season 3, episodes 1 and 2. They feature Simon Lister, who's a photographer who does documentary work for UNICEF. I think he'd be a wonderful guest. And he would, Mark. And I've written to him, and I've linked to him on the show page. And if you look him up on Google, don't confuse him initially with Vice Admiral Sir Simon Robert Lister, different person, obviously. And don't tell Mr. Norris, my English teacher, from all those years back, that I've linked 5 or 6 ands in one sentence. My subby, Ron, from my short-lived newspaper days, would have set light to his Woodbine stash in horror and screamed me out of the office for that many ands, all in one collection and without permission. I can see him looking down now, the great Ron from the Tobacconists in the Sky, irately crossing all of the ands out and sending me back to my desk to start over, preceded by his usual mantra, "Boy, you're writing shit." Anyway, stop the press, Mark, because I could have had another and in there, and I did write to him, and he said yes. So Simon will be on the show. Maybe, Mark, you could send me a couple of questions that you'd like to ask him, and I can do it on your behalf within our chat. On the writing front, I tell you who our Ron would have enjoyed reading. It's Whom, boy, Whom, sorry. I tell you, whom Ron would have enjoyed reading. It's our next letter writer. This one is photographer, educator, and podcaster Jeremy Bassetti from Orlando Land. Dear Neil, I discovered the Photowalk and your other Fujicast in the middle of 2022, so I'm a bit new to the show compared to your other listener. I like that the other listener has become sort of folklore here. I reckon it'll probably go to their head after a while, you know. They'll be wanting merch next. Anyway, I enjoy what you're doing. Each episode is usually the perfect length to listen to during my morning run. Given, Jeremy, that most of these episodes are 1:45 to 2 hours. I know, I said I'm going to drop them down in length a bit, but I just couldn't seem to manage. So here's the deal. If you need them to be shorter, chop them in half manually, listen to one half one day, and the next half on your next photo walk. How about that for a deal? But yeah, Jeremy, given that they are sometimes as much as 2 hours, if that's as long as one of your runs, I've declared you in charge of the health and fitness floor at PW Towers. I'm issuing you a whistle and 2 sizes too tight workout top with the word PT on it in bold non-serif letters, probably bright green. You always know the PTs, don't you? Bright green letters. PT coming through. PT. I'm a PT, don't you know? I also enjoyed listening to your recent episode with Alice Tomlinson, whom, see, correct use, I know Ron would like you, whom I had the pleasure to interview in the past for my own podcast. I mostly interview travel writers, but also I've had the pleasure to interview photographers like Alice and Steve McCurry. Steve McCurry, the magic name you've just declared there. Steve McCurry, that's one of my interview dreams. Anyway, you mentioned sending photos of our adventures, and I wanted to send you a photograph for a book project I'm currently working on. It's called The Hill of the Skull. Ooh, that sounds menacing. The book is about a pilgrimage, not so menacing, to a hill near a town in the Bolivian Andes where Catholicism and indigenous traditions combine, melding into spellbinding rituals and practices. My word. Where did you find out about that? That sounds extraordinary. The photo I'm sending you is a portrait of an Amalta, a shaman-like figure who performs ceremonies on the Hill of the Skull. Keep up the good work from Jeremy. Yes, thank you for the photograph. And I've popped that on the show page today. And I'm going to link to your Steve McCurry podcast on the show page as well. I've just started listening to it. I haven't had a chance to listen properly. I think it's going to be one of my weekend jobs. But the introduction that you wrote for the podcast, listen to this. In this episode, we talk about his new book, his life in lockdown, Steve McCurry obviously is talking about, and what he thinks about photographic criticism like the colonial gaze. We also talk about risk-taking and being a witness to history. Wow, what is not to like about that episode? So yes, it's my weekend listen. I've joined you, or at least I've filled in my details for your writing newsletters, because writing is something that's increasingly fascinating me more and more. Lynn Fraser, who I know you know Lynn's name, she's just been on her own exploration. I've no doubt we're going to be hearing about that over the coming month or so. Lynn, you have no choice. I'm zooming you on that one because I can't wait to hear what happened and all about your adventures. But Lynn is going on a writing retreat, a beautiful place in Scotland. I think it's the one that I was quite keen to go on. It's a small cottage in the middle of nowhere. In fact, it's not even a cottage, it's kind of like a small sort of hunting lodge. It looks amazing. Writers also are discussing each morning how they piece their writing together, and it's something I'd like to do. So I've subscribed to your newsletters, and I'm looking forward to reading more about your work. In terms of timing, this is a good moment to introduce my guest, whom you will find out is all about the story Writing, as you'll find out in the second part, being a very integral part of his photographic work. Kerry Adams was responsible for our introduction. And I'm so pleased now to have spoken with Steve, who's enthused me, as Steve Reeves, to think more about making portraits, not just make a picture and move on style portraits. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's a very laudable way of doing street portraits. But I'm sold entirely on his very real interest in furthering the story, getting to know more about the people that he photographs. And much of those stories being about a generation who have, so much to teach. In this age of head down, swipe left, ooh, I just bumped into my fifth lamppost this morning sort of world that we frequent. So I think it's quite fortunate that Steve is redressing that balance by being your proxy ears with his story. We'll start with a story, though, that could have ended his career before he'd even begun, according, that is, to his college lecturer. Intrigued? This is Steve Reeves. Steve, your creative career starts with writing, copywriting, actually, under the bright lights of a town not known enough for its brilliance in terms of the creative industry, and a town where I happen to be born, Watford. Is that the start of your creative story?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I came out of school, I didn't know what to do, so I went to the job centre. They said, what do you like? And I said, I quite like art and pictures and posters and stuff. And they said, well, why don't you go to art college? So I did a year, a foundation course at East Ham, which was amazing, huge eye-opener for me. I sort of went from sort of someone who was, in those days, was a sort of a casual with like long blonde hair and jumbo cords and a white belt into someone who suddenly got into sort of, stuff like Morrissey and stuff. It sort of changed my whole life. Yeah. And I was at art school. And then I found out about this course in Watford, a writing course in Watford. And I applied for that. And it was a 1-year course up in Watford that taught you basically how to write adverts and posters and stuff. Wow. And it just really interested me because I've got quite a short attention span. And I like the idea of just coming up with all these ideas. I thought it was such fun, to sort of come up with a sort of a headline and poster and stuff. And I went there for about 7-8 months. Then I wrote this. I thought, a good way to try and get into. Then the hard thing is then to try and get into an advertising agency, and you team up with someone. So I was the writer, and then I teamed up with a friend who was an art director, and we sort of teamed up together, and we came up with this silly idea of writing a sort of letter to every creative director in London, pretending to be their love children. And it was a really silly idea. We did it on pink paper, and we wrote it in biro and said, I don't know if you remember me, but we once had a one-night stand. My name's Gloria.
Oh, Steve.
And it was a really silly idea. We had a one-night stand. Anyway, I got pregnant. I've never told you about this, but I had 2 boys.
Oh, my word. Right.
And then we put this, and 2 boys who really want to do this sort of job that you're good at. And then we put a picture of us in as children and covered it in, soaked it in perfume and did 100 of them and then put them in the letterbox. And the tutor at college said, well, you've just destroyed your whole career. That's the most stupid thing I've ever heard. But he got us interviews at every advertising agency in London. And, people like John Hegarty saw us and everyone saw us.
So it sounds like your tutor was playing the safe game. Whereas, what did those that you wrote to say? Were they saying, come on, this is a bit naughty, Steve, but I've got to admit it got my attention. And that's what advertising is all about.
I suppose so, yeah. Some of them were quite... in those days, everyone had a secretary that would take the letter into them, and this thing stank. We literally soaked it in the cheapest perfume, and it was pink envelope with, handwritten. Yeah. And so it definitely got their attention, amongst all the other letters that they received every day.
You knew the audience you were reaching. Did any of them have a word in your shell like? Did any of them say, listen, Mr. Reeves, this is not the way it should be done?
No, they genuinely all loved it.
Really?
And it got into some magazine called Campaign, which is a sort of
Campaign, yeah, I know it.
And we became sort of quite, it just got us very, I was 19 and they literally gave us a job for 40 quid a week you started on. And so I was like the youngest person in advertising for a long time. Not anymore.
But it gave you a kind of cult status, I would imagine, to start with. People knew you.
Yeah, it really helped launch our careers. And it was just a silly sort of thing that we just decided to do on the spur of the moment. And when you're young, you don't really think about what you're doing until after you've done it. Of course, when the tutor said to us, well, you've made a huge mistake here, we thought, well, we can't get about the letterbox.
I'm interested by how writing is taught, though, because it's quite a niche thing. And for somebody who'd stepped into a job centre to say, I want to make pictures, that was a bit of a left turn at the traffic lights as well. I mean, is writing inherently in you and somebody just needs to bring it out? Or is it something that is teachable?
I think at the college, they just told us to be very concise with the writing. And I was never a very good copywriter. And Paul was never a very good copyright, the person I worked with. We were both just good at coming up with ideas, and we used to try and avoid writing as much as possible. But when we did, you would just talk, people would just create, their bosses would go through it, just cross words out. And so you just became more and more sort of precise. You just write everything as concisely and briefly as possible, which is right. That's what I quite like about Instagram. When I put my posts up on Instagram, although they're getting longer and longer, that 2,200 character limit, which is quite vicious at times, but you're amazed. You write a sort of 5,000 character thing about someone, you go through, and it's just, I really enjoy the challenge of crossing words out and writing the number 2 instead of the word 2 or whatever, or
shortening it
just
down.
trying to make it as short as you can. And sometimes it's incredible how you can keep the sort of essence of what you want to say in a very short amount of words. I think it's just practice writing, isn't it? So anything.
Yeah, it is. And I think you learn from those that have been in it quite. I mean, I remember working with, and I've talked about him on the programme before, dear old Ron, who was my subby, who I would imagine is at the news desk in the Sky by now. Going by the amount of woodbine, the smoke-filled room that we all sat in with Ron. But he would literally, and I know that's an overused L word, take a piece of paper from you and cross through it in an angry fashion as well, Steve. He was never very kind about what he crossed through. He'd bellow at you, but you would learn. You'd think, in fact, he would have made a great course for learning to write for Twitter. He was well before his time.
Yeah, character limits. Yeah. They are good, the character limits to some extent, I think. I love that conciseness, of writing. I think I really love reading other people that write very tightly as well.
Yeah. On your film directing website, there's sort of 2 halves of the story today that I'd like to talk to you about. I was drawn to the description that you're all about the story, whether that's 90 seconds or 30 minutes. And I kind of nodded as I was reading it because I could recognise that by your work. We talk a lot about story and photography. Story has become this word to describe everything from a piece of, fantastic documentary work to, if you take a social media extreme, a picture of a blueberry muffin on somebody's Instagrid. What does story mean to you, though? Because it's somewhat been hijacked a little bit by social.
I suppose a lot of it does go back to advertising. Again, what I was saying about the writing, it's just trying to get across the sort of emotion or the feeling of an encounter. I mean, in the photography in particular, I when I chat to someone on the street, I do sort of get that sense of, I want to sort of recreate what I've got out of my encounter with them, I suppose, in a way. I mean, film-wise, it's more difficult because, you have to sort of, when you're writing a film, I mean, the only film I've made is that Keeping Rosie film, but it was like the sort of 4th or 5th, I've got a writer that I work with on film stuff. It was like sort of 4th or 5th script we wrote, and actually we wrote that script out of sort of desperation. It wasn't the sort of thing we wanted to do. We wanted to do sort of comedy.
Well, then it's anything but comedy, this one, isn't it?
No, I know, it's a really grim.
I watched the trailer and only after a few seconds I realised it wasn't about comedy.
Well, that whole film is based on a life experience I had. That I was driving home with my kids when they were tiny in the back of the car, and they wanted a drink. They were desperate for a drink. They kept saying, "Can you get us a drink? Can you get us a drink?" So I pulled over. I parked the car it's impossible to park the car anywhere, isn't it now? So I parked it in this side street, and I ran across the road to this sort of mini mart to grab them 2 bottles of water or whatever it was. And as I was running back, this cement lorry skidded, and literally I didn't see it at all, and it stopped like a foot away from me. And I thought, my God, if he hadn't stopped, I would have been squashed. I would have been killed without a shadow of a doubt. They would have scraped me up off the road, taken me to the morgue or whatever, but they wouldn't have known there was a car parked around the corner with my 2 children in at all. They just would not have had an idea at all.
Horrific
and
story.
and that always sort of fascinated. And that's where the sort of Keeping Rosie, the whole premise of the whole film came from. That, there's the whole idea is that there's a child left in a car, and the parent gets killed, and that's so that came from that. And that wasn't the sort of film that we ever thought we'd do. We always thought we'd do a sort of much more sort of commercial comedy. But there was something about that idea that the people, because that's hard, making a film, 99% of it is getting the money, 1% is writing it, and the people that were paying to make the film loved that simple premise. So maybe simplicity is the answer that you were.
Well, simplicity, also authenticity, and I think you do yourself a disservice by saying 1% is the writing, because I would imagine the story, just explaining it to us there, I will certainly watch it in a different sense now, because there's that reality to, my God, what if Steve had been 2 seconds earlier?
Yeah, it's just
sliding doors moments. That's why Sliding Doors is so good, isn't it? Because it's a simple idea and it is very well written. Well done, by the way, on your 4 British Arrows nominations. I'm not sure what happened in the end with that, because that was a couple of years ago, but to be nominated by your peers is always a good thing, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It's only a couple of years, and I always think nominations is as good as winning, as far as I'm concerned, Steve. But I was looking through your film portfolio. The names that you've made films for include Nokia, NatWest Bank, the Royal Navy. I was just mentioning 3, and it's immediately very clear to me that you don't make commercials. Yours are stories. You say you've made 1 film, but as I look through your portfolio, you've made many films of just a couple of minutes, and sometimes less than that. Let's take Nokia. I thought this was just an inspired idea. You played a single track to 3,800 people across the world, then gave them a single phone call. I know you were the director of that. Did you get him? Do directors get involved in the writing as well? Because of course you need to believe in the idea. Yeah,
because I'm an ex-creative, often when I'm given ideas, that it's quite a collaboration. Because I used to go on shoots as the writer, and we used to work with some big Hollywood directors deliberately. David Fincher.
Wow.
We worked with Mike Figgis. And we would work with them to teach us how to direct. And the most inspiring of all to me was Mike Figgis, because he never really got involved with the camera. And I thought that I loved that idea that he would just sit back and just let everyone do what they want. All the crew do the best to their abilities and just oversee it and concentrate on the actors. And I loved that whole approach, and it sort of really affected the way I work.
So did he let essentially the director of photography take the director's chair, calling cut, and he was?
No, he'd say like, "Oh, I want the actor to come in the room, go up to the desk, and say something. What do you want to do about that?" And the lighting camera person would say, "Well, I'm going to lay a track here.
Yeah.
I'm going to have the track following the person this way."
Yeah.
And then the art department would say, "Well, okay, I'm going to put some stuff in the foreground so the camera's moving." And it was great. It wasn't like, it was a really brilliant way of working, I thought, because it was all his way. It was all about the actors, all about the storytelling, the technical side of it. He really did leave to he's a very technical guy, and he's a very clever guy. He left that to them, and I loved that. And that's, and even on sort of Keeping Rosie, that's how I sort of worked on that film. It was you sort of just get the heads department to stand in the room, and then get the actors to act it out, and you watch them acting, and then you all discuss it amongst each other. Well, where's the camera going to go? How are we going to? Which is so different to a way a lot of commercials are done, where you've got to hold the can of lemonade or can of Pepsi Cola at a certain angle, so the poor actor's got to walk in and stand like this with the light hitting and it's so hit their mark, and then smile, and then pretend to, when they drink the drink, you've got to see the logo in the right place and stuff. I hate all that, and I love the way he works, because it was the opposite. It was so much more about letting the actors rule the room, which I think is so important.
So if you had to give words of advice for anybody wanting to become a director, what would those gems, what would those nuggets be? Yeah,
well, I think the whole of directing is basically knowing what all you need to do as a director is know what you want to achieve, and that's it. Know what the story is you want to tell. You don't need to know how to get there. You just need to know what you want, and then allow other people to deliver that to you. And that could be the actors, that could be the wardrobe department, that could be the hair and makeup, or the lighting camera person. Yeah. But you just need to know what you want, and then when you see what you want, then you're happy and you can move on. Yeah. So it is most of it, and I'm quite good at, because I started as a director mainly doing. Which is really weird how my sort of career has sort of come full circle. I started doing mainly sort of street casting, dealing with normal, real people on the street, casting them, and very, very simple performance pieces with non-actors, which obviously is kind of what I'm doing now, like interviewing real people on the street. And then it developed into working with bigger and bigger actors and bigger budgets and stuff.
I want to come on to your photography, but I'm wondering, I'll ask this question out of sequence because it's relevant now. The people that you meet and you photograph then, are you in some respects casting them for a future possible role in a film of yours?
No, there's sort of, people often say to me, why don't you film them more? Because it takes, people talk for like sort of 20 minutes to me sometimes, or sometimes it's 1 minute. But, when they talk all that time, there's a lot of stuff that isn't that interesting, and again, going back to my sort of writing, I just take out the bits that I think are interesting. Like someone the other day was really interesting, but then he started talking about he was a healer, and he said, if I touch your shoulder, I'm going to if you've got any pain, I can get rid of your pain. And then other people can get very religious as well when they talk to me, talk about God, which I don't really want to touch upon that too much in my sort of in my work, so I don't. If I were filming them, that would all have to go in to some extent, I like taking out of the encounter my interpretation of our little chat and the bits I enjoyed about the chat. So it's quite selfish in a way, I suppose. I'm editing people's lives a bit, but I like the fact that me and this person have met, and that's what comes out of it is what I've kind of the way of thinking,
As Steve Reeves returns for part 2 soon. Have you been walking anywhere we should know about? I'd love to receive your pictures, receive your stories. Send them to stories@photowalk.show. As I say, you can send them through the contact page. Although if you're going to send pictures, you'll need the email address, because there's no way of sending your photographs through the contact page. Not as yet, anyway. Not that I've found. So stories@photowalk.show. If you can resize your pictures, fantastic. And that size is 2,500 pixels wide, whatever shape they are. If you can do that, that would really help me in the posting department. This is wonderful. I've gone deeper and deeper into the woods. I've no idea, because I've generally been doing a circle. Oh no, Neil, you're going to start talking about that film soon. Yes, the one where they bump the rocks together. Should I mention it? No, don't do that. Not a good idea when you're walking in woods alone. All right, I'll take your advice. Did you know there's actually 2 photo walks a week now? Friday's episode, this one, and Wednesday's Extra Mile. It's grown into a photo walk. I knew that it would eventually. I had that feeling when we started. Well, when the photo walk last year became the dominant, sounds like the dominant species. So it became dominant's a horrible word, isn't it? Became the program. I knew that sooner or later the extra show that I did a week would probably grow into a photo walk, and it has. So thank you to our Extra Mile patrons who have the Wednesday show exclusively. They support it with a modest monthly or annual donation. Without you, honestly, the show would not be what it is. So thank you. You are very much part of my team, along with our precious sponsors, because a program like this is a full-on production. Plus, we meet once a month for the InVision show on Zoom. our own guest speakers, questions from my roll of 12, and an invite to share the pictures that you've been making. We met just a couple of days ago, and it was fantastic to see the photographs that you've been making.
On this week's Extra Mile.
Yes, it is out now, and I have two guests. I have a real meander in conversational terms, actually in physical terms too, with one of my fondest and dearest photography friends, Giles Penfound, former Army photographer and head of PR in that context within the Army. We talk about hometown stories, and we also try to unpick the world of likes. Who do we make pictures for? Who is our audience? Are the numbers who engage with us on social media important? What does it all mean?
You know, am I going to feel really any more different if 30 people engage with, or 30,000? You know, when does the figure end? You know, when is enough is enough? I think the purity of it, the most important people for me who have an engagement with it are the subjects.
Yeah.
Because I always give them prints and show them the work. That's the most important thing. After that, well, it's not up to me, and if I detach myself from that sort of mania of needing justification and verification, validation. There we go. That's the one. Then I'm missing the whole point of it. You know, because then it's not about the story. Then it's not about the subject. It's just about, my ego.
And extra miler Andrew Hardacre, based in Hong Kong, shares what it's like to make pictures in a place that's very different to the high rises, the big banks, that sort of that skyscraper look that you think Hong Kong is just about. Oh no, it's a very different place to the place you might imagine, including what to watch out for when you're walking.
The things that I am more nervous about rather than snakes are some of the centipedes we have here, which can grow to a considerable size, sort of 9-10 inches long. And these Scolopendra centipedes, they are really quite nasty, and they will hospitalize you if they get good hold of you.
They will get hold of you. It's not just that they brush up against.
They live in the leaf litter, and so if you're wandering around and you don't have proper footwear on, and you happen to kick the leaf litter, and there happens to be a sleeping Scolopendra in there, and he'll sort of envenomate you.
Plus, and if you give us both a further minute, we talked about the frustration of not coming back with what you want photographically when you head out. You know those days when you think, oh, it's just not happening. It's not working. Why? We're very tough, aren't we, on our pictures and on ourselves? So it's a reminder, really, this part of the conversation with Andrew, that some of the great pictures that have stood the test of time that we aspire to aren't all as they seem when you first view them, or certainly when they were first made.
I was a little bit disappointed the other day. I think it was one of Elliot Erwitt's photographs of the legs and the dog, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I always used to think that's a fantastic photograph. It's actually a big crop from a much bigger frame.
Heavily cropped, isn't it?
It's heavily cropped, yeah. I had this idea that somehow he would have sort of managed to position himself so that was the frame filler.
Which is what I always thought.
And then there's this very famous Cartier-Bresson picture of the man outside the station leaping over the puddle, and that was the decisive moment. That's cropped. If you actually look at the full frame, part of it is blocked out by a wall. And it was one of the few obvious examples where he had not got in the camera, in the frame, the finished product. Yeah. But he thought it was so good that he wanted to keep it. And I think sometimes we're much too hard on ourselves, that we think that we have some sort of entitlement to go out and shoot successful pictures each time we go out.
There's more in our conversations. It's an extra hour of walking, just over actually, 1 hour 2 if you want to be precise, in this week's episode, The Extra Mile, which is out now. And if you want to become an extra miler, you can click on the support the show icon on the front of the website, photowalk.show. And thank you to all whom are making this show a weekly adventure with our cameras, including, of course, our sponsor.
For quality used and inspected photo and video kit with a 6-month guarantee upon what you buy, visit mpb.com. It's not a big brook as such, but it's a
How can I get to it? I have to stoop underneath this branch that has fallen across the understory here. Here we go. Isn't this the most relaxing noise? Well, I suppose so, Neil. Depends how much coffee you've drunk. All right. Don't have to be bass. Let me get a picture, actually. Hold on, let me put my letters down. It's a bit marshy here by the side of this tiny brook. But let me get a picture. I like the way the tree fell across the... That was strange. I put my eye to the screen then. Don't do that, Neil. It's a screen. You tap on it. Here we go. Ricoh GR3. That's what I've borrowed for my test drive this month from... actually, it's just over the month. From mpb.com. Super little camera. I love it. As I said, it's going to be very hard to give it back because it's definitely an everyday carry. Great for sketchbooking. There's no doubt about that. Fits in the there we go. Fits in the top pocket really easily. Actually, fits in my jeans pocket. So it is a really good size of camera. At the end of the show today, I'd been looking for some country music for reasons that will become clear in just a moment or two, but I couldn't really find the country music that I wanted, so I'm going to play you, we have a play-out song at the end. I'm going to play you a song that we have heard before, but I think it's very appropriate for the listening nature or the time nature of what we've been talking about today. Taking time, making your photographs, taking time meeting the people and listening to the people that you photograph. Anyway, that's the play-out song coming later on. You'll love this wonderful tale coming up. And it comes via a letter from a very precious friend of the show. It's Madison Thorne in country music land, or Countryville, actually, isn't it? Nashville, Tennessee. Hey, Neil, here's a story for you that's the epitome of asking for forgiveness instead of permission. Isn't that just the mantra for photographers quite often? I recently taught my way into a photo pass for the 30A Songwriters Festival, which is a music festival in Florida. And since I wasn't on assignment, I could take whatever kind of photographs I desired. The lineup was fabulous. I know. I looked at it. What a festival to be at. But I knew I wanted to get a shot of one particular musician, Lyle Lovett, one that would make an impression on him. I'd photographed him at a show a few months prior, and I wanted to solidify a rapport with him and his camp. Now, you should know something about Madison, filling in some gaps here, in case you are one of our new photo walkers. Madison takes, I'll put a link on the show page, wonderful music pictures. That is her passion. We talked to her about another project that was not to do with music at all, and I'll put a link up for that on the show page as well. But music is... about to break into song. Music is music is her first love, and her photographs, her documentary pictures are wonderful, and so yeah, I can understand why Lyle Lovett, certainly in the genre that you love, would be a photograph that you wanted to get, and obviously a relationship you like to form. But with a dozen other photographers at the outdoor main stage, going back to the story, and a 3-song maximum rule on shooting from the front of the stage, I needed something drastically different in order to stand out from the rest. Now, I'm going to break away again. Sorry, Madison. I'm digressing again. I photographed, it's a long while ago now, actually. I did just a very short time photographing bands, and I was doing it for a particular friend of mine, and I got in to see, or rather photograph, Jamie Cullum. Would you describe him as... he's jazz, isn't he? I suppose that genre, jazz, of course, yeah. I mean, I know he does so much else, but jazz, I suppose, at the heart of Jamie's work, and I got a pass to photograph a particular concert that he was doing. It was an open-air concert as well, actually, and it was the first time that I came into contact with this rule, the rule that is called the 3-song rule. And it really disappointed me. I thought, no, because later on during the show, Jamie might do something that is photographic gold, but he might not do it for the first three. I mean, you and I both know that oftentimes, patience is the key, isn't it? You need to sometimes bed into a photographic situation or environment. So having somebody say, yeah, you can do it, but I'm going to move you aside in about 12 and a half minutes is, well, it was, for me at the time, quite disappointing. But I looked up to see why this rule is more than simply a power trip over photographers. And there seem to be some good reasons. And I found them on a concert photographer's website, a photographer called Adam Elmakias, and I'll link to him on the show page today. And these are some of the reasons that he proposed for the 3-song rule that is imposed on photographers at a concert when you're at the front making pictures of the talent. After the first 3 songs, he means, artists can start to look pretty sweaty. Huh? I suppose so. But then that just shows the graft, doesn't it? Flash is blinding when used excessively and by multiple photographers. Yes, I understand that can be a problem, although there's often a no flash rule. I know that as well. You're there, first 3, no flash. Flash can mess up the show if it's a dark concert. Yes. Security has work to do in the pit area and photographers don't help. Yep, get that. Some photo pits block concert goers' views. Can't have that for the whole concert. So there's some of the reasons. I'm sure there are others. Madison, perhaps you have some you can share with us as well for the 3-song rule. Anyway, back to our Madison's letter, who had decided that the 3-song rule was going to ruin her chances of getting a truly original shot anyway. Shortly before Lyle's set, says Madison, I noticed a trailer hitch attached to the stage that was about 2.5 feet off the ground and right next to a long ramp that the artists had to walk up to get on to the stage. If I could just manage to somehow climb onto the trailer hitch, I'd find myself at eye level with Lyle and just a few feet from him. As he walked by for his performance, I weighed up my options. Taking this photo would be an imposition on my part to photograph an artist that I didn't know that, this intimately moments before he had to perform. It's widely understood as being frowned upon, and frankly, it could have been perceived as rather rude of me. But my only bit of hope was that Lyle, being a photographer as well, maybe he'd understand my fervent desire to get the shot. And heck, it was all going to happen so quickly. Lyle was supposed to walk just right past me and onto the stage. The whole thing would be over within a few shutter clicks. So I decided, let's go for it. We should have some dramatic music now, shouldn't we? Some sort of, I don't know. You imagine it. You can do that. You're good. Roll dramatic music in your mind. Ready? Now, here we go. I waited about 50... Can you hear that? Wow, you're good. That's dramatic music coming from you. Wow. I waited about 15 yards from the stage so as not to give away my intentions too soon and get myself kicked out. But finally, it was showtime. I watched as all the people's heads in the backstage area turned towards the tour bus, indicating Lyle's imminent arrival. And that was my cue. I bolted to the trailer hitch. I clambered up. As I turned around on the beam, Lyle's cowboy boots hit the far end of the ramp. He walked with focused intent and merely glanced at me as I fired off my shots. Lyle was inches from the threshold of the stage and subsequently just inches from me when a stagehand ran over and stopped him in his tracks. Mr. Lovett! I'm so sorry, sir, but we need just a few more moments before we're ready for you. Lyle nodded understandingly, crossed his arms, took a couple of steps back from the stage, and then slowly looked over to me. My dear Neil, says Madison, I need you to understand that my short-statured self was balanced precariously on a 3-inch metal beam with my camera in one hand and my utter audacity on full display as Mr. Lyle Lovett stared right at me. I brought my camera down out of respect and put up my hands slightly in an attempt to apologise, and nervously said, "I've completely stranded myself up here. You see, Madison, that's the way to do it. Make him feel sorry for you." He laughed, thankfully, and I breathed a sigh of relief. "What's your name?" he asked. I should be doing this in a more Lyle Lovett accent, shouldn't I? Or lilt. I can't. "What's your name?" he asked. "Madison, sir." "Hi, Madison. I'm Lyle. How'd you like the R6? He gestured to my Canon R6 I had dangling by my side. Cue a full 60 seconds conversation with Lyle Lovett about camera gear, whilst I was stuck a few feet in the air. It was a fun exchange. He knows his stuff. He's a true gearhead. Finally, the stagehand ran over and told him that they were ready. Lyle took one final moment to adjust his tie. I took my shot, and he was off to play a stunning set. Lyle was kind enough to connect with me after the festival, and he even said he liked the image, so I guess all is forgiven. I rolled the proverbial dice with this one, but boy, did it pay off. One of my favourite images I've taken in a while, and bonus that it makes for one heck of a story. That it does. All the best, and don't do anything I wouldn't, which is apparently not much. Cheers, Madison. Madison, 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 and Madison. That is a story. I love it. In fact, oh no, don't do it, Neil. I Lyle love it. The amount of times I've used that on a radio show from my past when playing his music is frankly embarrassing. But yeah, what a story. Fabulous. I love that you just thought, no, I've got to be inventive here. I want this picture. It's really important. It's precious. Well, it's genuinely a precious picture to you. So you were prepared to take the risk. Do you know, he's a photographer. He knew that. He probably looked at you and thought, yeah, I get it. Go on. He seems to me that kind of character anyway. So I've popped that picture on the show page today with a link to more of Madison's wonderful work and what you can clearly read as her sincere love of and for music. And I've written to him. He now joins my list of Bryan Adams, Patti Smith, and a few others who from celebrity land, whom I can see Ron now. It's whom, son, whom. Okay. I would really love to talk to about their picture making. I am keeping the faith. I really am. But I tell you what, if I get an interview with Lyle Lovett, Madison, how about you and I, by the power of Zoom, link up and do that one together? What do you say? Am I getting a nod? Or am I getting a shake of the head? I can't tell. Or do you just look a bit surprised? Or do you just look a bit, Neil, there's no way you're going to get that. It's one of two. But anyway, there's the offer. It would be great, Madison, wouldn't it? You and I interviewing Lyle Lovett. Fantastic. Right, next week I'm talking with a good friend of this show, and I like to think a good friend personally now as well. It's Jason Florio. We're putting our expedition boots on for some news about January next year. I'm going to be walking and talking with him about his photographic life. And then I'm hoping we're going to get all fired up about a particular photographic adventure. So just a slight tease to what's coming next Friday for the Photowalk. There are, and this is an apposite moment to say it, many beautiful places in the world, and being a photographer gives us a chance to be out in it, if you will. And so Africa is one of those places for me. It clearly is for Jason. And I'm reminded by a conversation I had with Andy Mumford, who travels to some pretty amazing places, just how special making pictures is and the gratitude that we all have for it. That it being photography. Here's Andy Mumford from a few shows ago.
I mean, I've had experiences, some this year. I was in Namibia, which is a place I'd wanted to visit for 15 years. I finally got there this year, and we were out on the Skeleton Coast, camping out there, just hundreds of miles from anyone, underneath the stars. And I was so profoundly moved by the privilege. You know, that I was sitting there thinking, this is something that's happening to me. Someone reminded me of an incredible quote from The Office, the American version of The Office, not the British version, which is something along the lines of, I wish we could realize these are the times of our lives when we're actually in them, rather than only through memory. Something like that. I'm probably badly misquoting it, but I think it's a really valid thing, is that concept of actually being in the moment and being appreciative and having gratitude in the moment, rather than looking back and going, oh, that was amazing. Because then it's gone, and it's holding that moment and feeling whatever it is that you're doing, whatever it is that gives you that peace, that utter contentment, which is very rare in life, because we're always busy with something. We might not be unhappy or miserable, but we very rarely sit back and go and just forget about everything. So for me, there's been a few moments this year, almost always out in the landscape, when you feel that absolute profound gratitude and just pleasure and meditative awareness of being in the moment.
Andy Mumford from episode 358. I'll link to that episode on the show page today. The sun is just trying to peek its way out. I might try and get some more pictures of look at this. I tell you what, this part of the woods here, is it a forest or is it a woods? I don't know. It seems like I've been walking long enough for it to be a forest. I think this is prime bluebells territory. I really do. It's a bit off the beaten path, and maybe they would flourish here. I'm looking at a particular clearing there which just says bluebells in a different key, clearly, but it does. All right, let's get another sketchbooker using this on loan from MPB GR3, which I've been delighted to use. What should we get? There's a lot of fallen trees here. I find fallen trees quite fascinating, with the life that sort of continues on them, particularly the mushrooms. The mushroom breeding ground, this, Neil, be careful. Thought you were on them when you started the show today. Let me get a picture here. This is great because the macro on here is a super feature. So let's pop the macro on. Now, it is difficult often to do everything with one hand on the microphone and one hand on the camera. But I think we're going to manage this. Here we go. Oh, come on, macro. One thing you need to remember to do with macro is actually getting close. I mean, it's called macro for a reason. And often, because my focal length lenses, or the lenses I use rather, for my everyday work with my R6s or my Fuji cameras aren't necessarily great macro lenses, so you just need to get in really, really close. So let's get closer. Closer still. Closer, Neil. Closer. There you go. Wonderful sort of rings on these mushrooms. See, again, with my app, I could tell you what they are and sound all very knowledgeable. Neil will always know the secret, though. Don't be like that. So yes, Andy Mumford from episode 358, and more about Africa next week on the show. Here is a letter from Charles Nagy, one of our extra milers. By the way, I didn't mention this before, but we do sit on the very precipice, how do you spell that word, of getting to our 300th patron. I realise that for some creators, 300 is, I got there 800 years ago, Neil. Haven't you got to 300? But I'm very proud of being almost there. I really am. And we're so close. And in terms of targets, we'd be a third of the way toward the ultimate goal. 10 more patrons. Cue the song, 10 more patrons. And we're there. So Charles, I'm privileged that you are one of those helping us to bring more of these shows to you in the years to come. Anyway, your letter. Hello from America Land. I will skip over the usual praise of the show so as not to offend your British modesty. It's really hard not to heap praise on you and the show. Try not to. I'll have to go and hide behind a branch. Anyway, episode 364 had some really great moments, says Charles. I really love the bit about the prime lenses. I am a Canon shooter. I have a soft spot for the Olympus EM5. Old, yet amazing still. It felt really good to have my intuition backed up. But in terms of episode 365 and the start of your own 365, well, this is the year that I finally started and stuck with my 365er. I am giving myself 1 or 2 days a week leeway to use an older photograph and contemplate the growth that I can see in my work. Actually, that's like Patti Smith, second mention of the show. That's got to mean she's going to come on, surely. She's a super photographer. But Patti Smith had a 366. Why would that be, Neil? Come on. Leap year? Yes. And we talk about it in the Extra Mile this week. But leeway's a good thing. Patti didn't make all the pictures herself, but she featured other pictures that she was inspired by. It's quite the story, actually. The book, is it Book of, now I've got to remember this, is it Book of Days? I'm pretty sure it's is it Book of Days? Oh, there goes the aircraft. Don't start now, we're near the end of the show, I thought you'd gone. But I think it's a good idea, Charles, to give yourself a bit of leeway, not to be too hard on yourself if you don't post on the day you made your picture, or for a couple of days. What was it that Mike Miller, one of our patrons, said? He said, be kind, give yourself a few days. He said 7 across the whole year, so he's still being quite strict. But give yourself a bit of leeway, give yourself a chance. Don't be too hard on yourself, because if you start missing a few days and you think, right, that's it, whole project goes out the window, and it doesn't need to. This is a fascinating tree. I'll get a picture of this in a moment with my camera here. I am going to write up, by the way, about the Ricoh on the website. He says, digressing. This bottom of the tree looks like a kind of a kettle. That's weird. Neil, are you sure you didn't have a go at those mushrooms? No, I didn't. Back to Charles. It's the early days of this year, and I can see the progress. The one thing that I really, really love about the 365 project is that I have a renewed interest in going out and looking for shots every day. I feel that I'm coming out of a creative funk, and I love the challenge. Being able to, contemplate the growth that you see in your work when you're making one of these 365s, I think is part of the whole process. If you are new here, and I know we have new walkers with us. Walkers? That sounds like The Walking Dead? No, we probably shouldn't call you that, should we? I know we have new photo, especially when I'm in the middle of a forest. I know that we have new photo walkers with us each week, and just in case you don't know what a 365 is, it's where you take one picture every day for a year and you post it somewhere. That could be Instagram, that could be Flickr, that could be your own blog. I guess if you wanted, you could just save them up and release a book of them. They don't have to be online. It's a personal project as much as anything. But that's what Charles is talking about here. Thank you for being a photo friend, he says, and opening up my photo world view. There are only 2 photo podcasts that I never miss, and the Photowalk is tops of that list. What's the other one, Charles? You're leaving me on. I don't know. You've left me on a ledge here. What is it? You must let us know. I can give them a shout out, as the youth say, missing their letters. I've been an extra miler for a while now, and I hope to make the Zoom show soon. All the best from Chuck. Chuck, thank you so much. I'm really pleased that the 365 is proving to be, I was going to say useful, but that's such a blur, sort of vanilla. It's not very creative at all, is it? But a useful conduit. Certainly for me, it's done exactly what you say, Charles. I've opened my eyes and I'm seeing I know it sounds odd because I've been a photographer for 2 decades, but I'm seeing in a new way. I really am. I'm seeing in a way that I haven't looked before. Oh, Neil, really? Yeah, yes. Right, let me get this picture of the kettle tree. Honestly, I haven't been at the mushrooms, I promise. just a moment ago, I said to you that I wouldn't be surprised if this is a prime location for bluebells. I think I'm surrounded by those shoots, and I'm being very careful now where I walk. I tell you what, I'm definitely coming back here to photograph here when the bluebells come out. I'm pretty sure this will be, he says, stepping right round, a carpet of them. Right, if you would like to send me some stories about what you've been photographing, where you've been, what you've seen, the adventures you've had. They don't have to be big adventures. You might well be saying, but Neil, I haven't had the chance to stand on a trailer hitch and photograph Lyle Lovett. Oh, maybe not. But just the stories of your life. They are fascinating. Honestly, they all are when you send them in and you look at what you've been photographing. Small stories, just small stories. Days out. We're going to the Isle of Wight for a couple of days next week. With the boys. It's one of our favourite places in the world. You know that if you've listened to this show enough. And I'm intending to go on a photo walk early in the morning. They'll all be lying in. I know what they'll be doing, so I'm going to go and make a couple of photo walks. Maybe down to the beach. I don't know. Maybe I'm quite moved by the idea of photography under piers. And there's a pier right opposite where we're staying. So, the photographic world is my oyster, as they say. Then do write to me. The email address is stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show. So you can send your pictures via that as well, by the way. 2,500 pixels wide if you can manage it. If you can't, don't worry, I'll do the heavy lifting for you. And I'll resize for the website. Or if you just have something you'd like to say about photography, what it means to you, as we say at the start of the show, it's all about the feeling, then I would love to hear maybe just a couple of paragraphs about what photography means to you at that same email address, or you can send it through our Facebook group, which is pretty lively, in a good way, in a good sense, by the way. In a supportive sense. So we have a page and we have a group. And yes, you could send your messages through there as well. So second part of my conversation now with Steve Reeves. First half was mainly about his film work and directing life. But this next part is about connection. It's about encounter. It's about making pictures of people and a generation of people in particular. Here's Steve Reeves, part 2. This is a good time to talk about your photography. Give me an idea of the timeline, because I know that we've gone from the job centre to copywriting to directing. Yeah. When does the photography start to play a part? In particular, the stories that you make now.
When I was making commercials and short films, and I was always very dismissive of photography. I was, what's the point? I was watching a great film the other day called The Square. I just watched it and thought, God, there's so much amazing moving image out there. And every shot, every time you freeze frame on a great film, it's like an amazing photo. It's 20,000 likes on Instagram, just those stills, and it's incredible. And so I've always been a bit sort of dismissive of photography, because how can it doesn't express what a moving image does. So I never took a camera with me anywhere. When I went all over the world and met amazing people.
Isn't
never
that interesting? Yeah.
took a single photo at all. Yeah. And I massively regret that now, obviously. Also, I didn't really want to get into sort of carrying a big camera around, but then they bought out this camera, this Fuji X100F, which is a sort of very small little fixed lens camera.
I know it well. Yeah.
My wife bought it for me because I was sort of saying I would quite like to carry something with me. And that kind of started, and that was 2018. And that's the first time I sort of took a photo, apart from art school, when you sort of practiced on an old Nikon film camera. Yeah. So it's the first time I took a photo, sort of not of my family.
Good heavens. I would never, yeah.
5 years now, I suppose.
You have an exceptionally generous wife as well. I think in 2018, the F had only just come out, and it's one hell of a camera.
Yeah, it was. And I still use it now. A lot of my photos. The last photo I put up on Instagram was on that camera.
Was that on the F? Wow. So talk to me about it's many projects within projects, and I'll come to that and what I mean by that in a minute. But talk to me about your photography then. Who piques your curiosity, and at what stage, Steve, did you think, I want to take pictures of everyday people who have a story to tell? I know I've simplified it greatly there, but that's essentially what it is.
Well, I started off because of 2018. I'd got this camera, and I started to just walk around doing sort of just candid street photography, and I'd get really excited by the sort of shot of someone standing next to a sign that made their head look a funny shape, or all those sort of things that everyone puts, the funny sort of shots that you see. I don't know, the sort of serendipity of life, the sort of Martin Parr type sort of.
And I mean, one of your latest ones that I love in that respect is the dance girls from the poster in 42nd Street next to the chaps that are not quite mirroring them, but there's a mirroring going on. There's irony and humour in it.
Exactly, and that was that's one of my shots. I loved that shot, and that was from probably one of my first shots. When I started just walking around looking, and it was amazing because it made the whole world. Yeah. I always used to just put my headphones on, listen to music, and just get from A to B as fast as I could, And then it opened this whole thing up. I sort of started to sort of walk a lot more and look a lot more, and I loved it.
But then, how did that turn into talking with people and essentially interviewing them?
In all honesty, what got me into the interviewing people was I took a picture of this outside University Hospital off Tottenham Court Road, and there was a woman smoking a cigarette, and she had a saline drip coming off of her. She was in a dressing gown, and it was a day like today. It was all sunny, and the smoke was sort of billowing around her, and I thought, this is quite an ironic shot. I quickly took a shot of her, and I got caught. I mean, I'm 6'5". I always get caught when I do candid shots, because I just, people see me. As soon as I raise the camera, they see me. And she sort of called me over. She said, why did you take that picture? I said, I just thought it was quite funny. You've got a cigarette on the go, and you're obviously being treated in the hospital. She went, yeah, I know. She said, but I've only got 6 months to live. Oh. And she came from the same part of London I originally came from, like in Ilford in East London. She said that she had a brain disease. Oh. It was incurable, and there was nothing. She said, it doesn't matter if I can just smoke as much as I want. Yeah. And she was with mates. And then it transpired that her mate was actually holding a joint, and the woman was smoking a cigarette and a joint at the same time. And she said, well, take a nice picture of me. So she put her arm around her mate, and I took a picture of them together. Mm. And it was just a cheesy picture of them both sort of smiling. And we had a really nice chat. And I went back and I uploaded them onto my computer. And there's this quite arty sort of ironic shot of her smoking the cigarette, like the first shot I took with all the smoke around her and the drip. Yeah. And then there's this sort of cheesy shot of her sort of grinning. I thought, I think it's a bit of an insult to put up the sort of arty one, because it's, everyone's going to look at it and go, God, look at these people. They're being looked after by hospitals and they're still smoking like chimneys. Yeah. So I put up the cheesy picture and I wrote about it, and I really enjoyed the process of writing about it. And it felt, when I finished, I felt I've actually done justice to this encounter that I had with this woman. Yeah. And I put it on Instagram, and it did pretty well, and people commented a lot about, and I thought that was really nice to actually chat to her rather than just steal a photo from her. I actually got to talk to her, and it kind of developed from there. It became quite a lot. It became older people, because I find them really interesting to talk to.
There does seem to be you seem to be, there's no such word as this, Steve, but I'm going to use it, you seem to be a nostalgiarist, and you are drawn to older people. A lot of the sub-stories within the story are of older people within other extended projects. Why is that?
Well, it's something an very old man said to me a long time ago. He said that in the old days, young people, children, were left with old people while everyone else went off to work. He said old and young people being together, it balances everything. You've got a very old person that gets joy from being around the young people, and the young people learn so much from the old people. And he said, and I think it's really sad now that the young people have nothing to do with the old people anymore. Mm. He said, they're still learning, the young people. He said, but they're learning from manufacturers. They're learning from advertising. They're learning from they're learning from people that are trying to exploit them and trying to take their money. He said when they learned from old people, they were learning things that are important to learn. I thought, God, that's such a beautiful observation.
Yeah.
He said, and it's so true now. Young people are learning from Kim Kardashian or whatever, when they could be learning from their sort of grandparents how to make things and do things. And he said it's a tragedy in our life. This bloke was 96-year-old bloke from the Caribbean said it to me, and it was such an amazing thing to hear, I thought. And I thought, actually, we don't talk to old people anymore. No one does. And particularly in our society, particularly in places like London, they are literally walked over, and ignored the whole time. And I've found that they've got incredible stories to tell.
Absolutely.
And I love it when old people talk about, when they were 20 or 25 having sex and all this crazy stuff they got. And it just makes you realise that actually life is it's a circle, and it's they shouldn't be ignored. And also young people don't. When I photograph young people, they're much, much more self-aware. I've got some amazing pictures of young people some of my best pictures, but I can never use them because I send them to them and they say, I don't like it.
Isn't that interesting? And also, I think, having seen some of your pictures of younger people, there's not so much of a written narrative around them. And I wonder if that's because they clam up more. Yeah,
and also what you ask a young person, you say, what do you want to be? They say, I want to be my best person. I want to be the best person I can be, which isn't really an answer. What do you think your life's going to be like? Well, I'm hoping that if I work hard, and they're all platitudes. They're not actual things. They haven't experienced, like when you talk to someone that says, a woman the other day that said, I lived in Brixton and we used to get bombed on the way in and on the way out. Well, there's amazing, interesting sort of stories, that come from them. And I think I'm hoping to do a book called The British Elders, because it's a really rich theme, and the world has changed. They are pre-internet. They still buy newspapers. They still pay in cash. They are a whole era of our society that is going to be gone forever.
Well, you seem to have a radar for them, Steve. I'm going to have to look through my notes to try and find it. Well, I did note down somebody's name, and I won't be able to find it straight away. There was a chap that was sitting in a brown... My dad used to have a very similar suit, 70s suit, and you saw him, you made a photo, and he actually, I think he commented to you words along the lines of, I'm just somebody stuck in the 60s, or something like that.
Yes, I remember him, and he was incredibly smartly dressed.
Yes, he was.
And he actually commented, because what I loved was he said, I suppose, because I said, it's lovely because it must have been amazing for photographers back in those days, where everyone did wear sort of nice overcoats, and now we've all got, the streets were so easy to photograph because there wasn't for sale signs everywhere. There weren't white vans. I mean, white vans are the absolute curse of my life. Every time I hold a camera up to someone, I've got 10 seconds to photograph, and a white van will pull up behind them.
I know.
I can't have that thing stuck in the back of the shot. Yeah. And in those days, there was none of that, and there weren't people wearing like silver puffer jackets, and it was the world must have been so much more elegant then, Yeah. And I said to him, and I said, "Oh God, you must think I'm really scruffy." And he went, and he kind of just looked at me and went, "I've got to get my bus now." And clearly thought I was.
Is there a best way to approach people? Because you clearly have a skill for doing it. There is no silver bullet, I know, but is there any advice that you would give? Because I love this idea of stopping people, engaging, having an encounter, making a picture, and then going that step further and listening.
It's so hard. It's so like if the first person you go up to just tells you to get lost, your whole day it's really hard. If the first person you go up to says, great, and you have a really good chat, then if something inside you feel a bit buoyed up, and it's easier to go to the next person. Yeah. And but it is still really, there's loads of shots I could have got, but I just lost my nerve. But my approach, I could say something like, oh, that's a lovely, so particularly the older people, because I often say, I'm doing the thing on sort of older people that are very well dressed, so I love what you're wearing, and that's quite nice, Yeah. Some people are amazing. Some people give you the most amazing stories. They'll talk to you, tell you the stories. Like a lady was talking about, she was 100, and she was sitting in Trafalgar Square, 100-year-old woman sitting in Trafalgar Square. I come up here every Saturday. I said, "You're 100." And she said, yeah, I used to work in boots during the war. She said, "I remember it, the blackouts, and it's just incredible. We used to work by candlelight."
Amazing.
And I said, "Can I take your picture?" And, "Oh, no." She wouldn't let me take a picture.
For all that.
And it was so crushing because I had this, I could have written about her in like 5 minutes. I knew it was everything I wanted was there. Her whole attitude to life. She was so open-minded.
How do you gather these stories then? Because when people share, you can't, unless you've got an amazing memory, Steve, do you record them in audio or are you writing stuff down as shorthand?
A bit of each. I used to have, I normally use the Notes app on my phone.
Oh, right, okay.
And I type sort of keywords.
Yeah.
Normally when I've said goodbye to them, I'll quickly write something as fast as I can.
Yeah.
Then the other thing I do sometimes is I do have the Record app on my phone, but that's problematic because the noise, people mumble a bit, it's really hard. And often people don't like you having that record thing going.
No, I know. Tell me about it.
And then, and the other thing I do often is I try and get their contact details. I'll follow up, I'll send them an email or I'll go and visit them.
There are, as I mentioned just a moment ago, though, Steve, there are projects within projects when you photograph people. Your behind-the-counter stories, for example. Now, that struck me straight away because my granddad owned the sort of size of shop, his own mini empire, if you like, that you've been photographing within the community, where everybody knows your name. Forgive me for sounding like a line out of Cheers, but I would imagine telling stories about people results in these gems of projects, and that you must think as you're making it, shops, is that how this happens?
Totally, yeah. Because I've got shops, I've got the project about the Irish people that came over to England, and then that also merged into the West Indian people that have come over as well, and I've been doing a lot of stuff on that, and that's a lot more structured. That's me reaching out to people and asking around. Because I often ask, if I see someone interesting, I'll say, "Do you know anyone else?" And I might get another couple of people out of that.
There was a character in Behind the Counter, Bob, who ran F. Cooker's shop in London, a very unique kind of shop, which sadly is no longer. I'll let you tell the story there. What was Bob's business that you interviewed him about? It had been part of his family's life for many generations.
There's a pie mash shop in...
pie and mash. And our American audience now are thinking, pie mash and jellied eels, need to add those in. Jellied eels, they're saying.
What is it? It's like a beef pie. It's a beef pie, isn't it? It's a beef pie with mashed potato, and then they boil eels in parsley sauce, is it, or something? And they pour the liquor, which is the sort of...
the jelly bit.
Top, it's like a sort of gravy.
Yeah.
And but he has closed, but he's actually... His family have set another one up in Montford.
Oh, fantastic. So, because he was worried it was going to be the last, I think he even said it's the last one in East London. They are no more.
No, there's another Cook's is in Dalston or somewhere. There is one more left, but they were everywhere, weren't they?
Yeah.
And it's a shame because I can't understand really why they're not packed full of sort of young, urban, cool people.
Well, I think it just needs to be found, doesn't it? And then everybody will be like, pie, mash, jellied eels, what's not to like, even though it sounds horrible. There was an interesting little detail there, actually. I looked a little bit more into that picture that you made, and there was a gas light from the 70s in the shop, which was an interesting throwback because we didn't have access to electricity. What was it? A couple of days or 3 days a week? And it was a 3-day week, wasn't it? So it would have been 2 days a week. There was no electricity. And they'd left the gas lamp was still in Cook's.
Really? Wow, that's amazing.
I saw behind her, yeah. There are, I suppose, plenty of nostalgia projects out there. What's next? What have you chosen next?
Well, there's an Indian restaurant one.
Like an Indian restaurant?
They're going now, sort of you're not supposed to call it, but curry house is what everyone used to call them in the days. Yeah. Because now... young people had nowhere else to go. You'd go for a Chinese meal or a Indian meal.
Right.
But now there's Thai, pizza, sushi, and they're massively suffering. They're all going to close. They're all closing down.
No, I never thought that about my local. I've got 2 local Indian restaurants, which frankly I'm ashamed at showing my accountant my. It's
a generation thing. The younger generation just don't
right. Okay.
Don't really think it's as as an interesting place. There's too much competition. There's Mexican. There's so much competition now.
I say so often on this program, Steve, that photography can be like a passport to a great wide world. You are proof, along with my dearest friend, actually, in photography, at least, Giles, that the world is so wonderfully on our own doorstep, isn't it? And we, there's no requirement for a passport. Encounters is what and local encounters mainly is what you're basing. Well, I say local in that it's London, which is quite a large area, but it is what you're basing everything on.
Yeah, and that's become quite important to me, that because it all started during sort of Trump and Brexit, and there's this sort of us and them thing, and everyone just gets dehumanized, The people coming across the channel in boats, they're dehumanized, everyone, and it's so wrong, and it's so upsetting, I think, that the sort of way the press treat people from other cultures in this country and the way they talk about them. And when you actually do talk to them, which I do all the time, we should be celebrating our similarities. We're all so similar. All people want to do is to work, have a family, and live in a warm and comfortable place. And they are very happy to pay tax and work hard. And it's so sad because the way the press talk about it is so different to the reality of it,
Also, it's about patience and being listened to. I mean, there's Alfreda, her story. You were passing a pub in Tooting when you saw Alfreda. You went in and took this extraordinary photograph of her. It's lovely because it's very well dressed, mature woman with a fashion magazine open showing a young model there. But she said it toward the end of your conversation, because she beckoned you over when you took a photograph first of all without her necessarily knowing. But at the end you had a conversation. She beckoned you over. And she said, "Thank you for listening."
Yeah, and lots of people say that to me. Lots of people say it's lovely to talk to you.
Yeah,
but people don't talk to them, And that's definitely a cultural thing for us British. Because I go out with this old guy called Michael, who was in his 98, and I walk down the road with him, and people are wonderful. If he falls over or gets lost, people will help him. But there's a whole other massive society. They're looking at their phones and just walk past him, don't notice. They don't realise there's this frail old man, in Tesco's or whatever, and they're so busy in their own little worlds, they don't see. Whereas I go out with another lady called Helen, who was a Ghanaian lady. Yeah. She's 83 now, I think. And it's incredible how people from her background, when you walk through Brixton, are so much more respectful. Yes. And there's a real difference. They call her auntie. She goes into the bank, they offer her a seat straight away. "Oh, auntie, sit here. How can we help you?" And they carry her shopping. And it's very different to the way Michael is treated very differently to Helen. I don't know if it's a male or female thing, I don't know, but there's definitely a difference.
Can I end by recounting some words from Henry? It's a picture you made and a story you told of this gent who came across to the UK from Grenada, 1961. "Every day," says Henry, we could all take a leaf out of his book, by the way, as you'll hear, "I'm up at 6 a.m. I get a cup of tea and get out the house. All I want to do is keep going." I wonder if that says everything about your passion for people, because this is a never-ending project, this thing that you're doing, isn't it?
It is to some extent, I just keep doing it, yeah. But there is a sense of urgency with the Irish and the Caribbean people, and also the older people from that generation, because it's changed. Older people now, when we do casting sessions, they say, used to say get in and get an old person in, you get a 70-year-old in, and they would look like us. Now 70-year-olds come in and they look amazing. They're wearing Nike tracksuits and whatever. There's a different generation. They're the Beatles. I suppose it's it's the pre-pop generation. Are the ones I sort of really like, because they've seen the world they've seen a world that no one that will never be the same again. They've seen it pre-social media, pre-mass media, pre-television, that sort of world they've lived in. It's like a whole age that's going to be gone forever. So they're the ones I try to sort of hunt down,
I'm going to do a Columbo, just one more thing question. What have you learned about people?
I think I've learned how nice they all are. I mean, nice is a really... I'm not allowed to use that word nice in advertising at all.
No, it's a very vanilla word in advertising.
Even Grammarly won't let me use nice because it's so cheesy. But most people are just really, really good, decent people, and it's such a shame because we live in a whole world of sort of fear, don't we now? Division. You know, if you were to just look at your life through the TV and through the newspapers, you would think it was but actually it's the individuals out on the streets all just want to, like I said earlier, they just want to get on with their lives and they don't want to do anyone any harm. They just want to do the best they can. And that's what I've found. And I never would have met them before. I used to live in a village. I used to live in my nice house and go to my nice office and talk to other parents at my kids' nice school. And that was it. That's my whole tiny little world that I lived in. They're all people just like me. And now I've sort of gone into this other world that's really interesting, you know.
Thank God your wife bought you a camera in 2018, eh? And my thanks to Steve Reeves for being our guest on the Photowalk this week. While we were listening to Steve there, I did have a check on the app, my Picture This app, which is brilliant, I have to say. I'm assuming it's brilliant. I've never thought to question the results that it churns out, but they're not bluebells. They are spring snowbells. Spring snowbells. There we go. I knew that, Neil. Oh, I knew you knew that. My other listener probably didn't. They're looking at me in a quizzical way. Did you? Oh, you did know. Okay. Why didn't you say then? So, my thanks to Steve Reeves for being our guest this week. For links to Steve and other photographers that you've heard about today, socials and the websites that we've mentioned, there's a few films as well. Put at least a couple at the foot of the page. Some inspiration. A film director one, and what was the other one? Simon Lister as well. Then go to the show page, which is episode 368 on photowalk.show. Or you can follow the link in the podcast player app that will also take you there. See that link just there? Scroll down a bit. We did this a couple of weeks ago, you know by now, surely. There it is, that one. Click that, that'll take you through to the show page. Thank you for your amazing letters this week. If you'd like to send in some thoughts, then you can do so at the email address I've given you. It's also on the show page. Ooh, I've just seen a shaft of light. I'm going to go and get a picture of that, and the play-out song comes on in a second's time. Send them to that. Oh, I'm going to have to rush. Hang on. Firing across. Not a very organised end to the show, Neil. I know, but you never know when the picture's going to come, do you? This is my plant life, love it moment. So send your amazing letters in, please, to stories@photowalk.show or via the contact page. Hang on, I've got to put the camera down so I can make the picture. Come back to you. Stay there. Stay with me. I'm staying here, Neil. I'm staying. Hold on. Camera out pocket. Focus, focus, focus. Don't you go anywhere, son. No, don't. I've just fired over here. Still there, still there. Oh, no, it's in macro settings still. Come out of macro. There we go. Done. See how quick you can work with this little sketchbooker? Wonderful. Let's put it back in its pocket. Our play-out song this week is called Life of Time by Bayo. You might recognise it because I played it, it's quite some time back actually, the Joel Meyerowitz show. Deep into last year, partly because I think it reflected time, and time was part of my conversation with Joel. And today I think it does that as well. So, it's been a conversation about time, hasn't it? About making time, listening, being with people. So it's all about time, and I think this song, the play-out song today, is a perfect representation, or perfectly accompanies what we've been talking about today. And so this week's postscript, it's a thought, and I can't find who to attribute this to. So it's going to have to just be anon, and it's only 10 words long, and these are the words: listening is one of the loudest forms of kindness.
It's all in our hands, this life of time that's given to us all. gathers round each night, each morn. We watch it pass and grow. It is all in our hands, it is all in our hands. With every field and rising sea, can hear the sounds of all, and with every change we'll always be where hope's not lost but found. It is all in our hands, it is all in our hands. It is all in our hands, it is all in our hands. And we know the change will surely come. Baby, one more trip around the sun. But we'll gather here where land meets sea, where we can be as one. And we know the change will surely come. Baby, one more trip around the sun, and we'll gather here where land meets sea, where we can be as one. It is all in our hands, and we know the change will surely come. This life of time, we can be. It's all in our hands, it is all in our hands.
This Life of Time by Bayo. And that's it for this week. My thanks to Steve Reeves, to Andy Mumford and Gabrielle Matola, and also to our extra milers Giles Penfound and Andrew Hardacre. Their episode is now out. To our letter writers, to you, thanks for being on this walk. And next week, well, if we started the show with a nod to a film title, we'll end with one too. Jason Florio, who is so often in West Africa, well, he'll be out of Africa, talking with me just west of London, walking with me actually just west of London, and we're going to chat about an adventure, our first Photowalk expedition. We've teased it. I think we should say some more about it. It's going to take us back to Africa, to markets, to fishing villages, and a river that winds its way towards Senegal and Guinea. That's next week. Final virtual fist bumps go to Neil Ford, head of stuff that only works after he's given it a reboot, Emily Rainier for your eyes in our Facebook group, and Andrea Gilpin, Chief of Staff on the Instagram and Ideas floor, to Artlist, to Epidemic for the music, and I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you next time.
The Photowalk is a Loading Zone production.